Welcome to Positive Recovery MD. If you're listening, chances are you want to create happiness around you and thrive in your life. We're glad you're here and you've come to the right place. This podcast will inspire and motivate you to not merely survive your recovery journey, we'll give you the tools to build or strengthen your foundation to thrive and flourish in your life. Each week, we'll come together as a community to have authentic conversations around addiction, recovery, and what matters. Growth and progress, not perfection. All while developing positive habits for you to utilize in your life. To learn more, please visit positiverecoverymd.com to sign up to receive the daily positive interventions that we'll review, as well as gain access to exclusive Positive Recovery content available only to Positive Recovery MD listeners. All right, let's get started.
Welcome. Dr. Powers here, one of your co-hosts. We have special guests today, and I cannot wait to introduce everybody. But first, let me introduce the rock star guest today, besides Sebastian. That would be Miss Sasha McLean. McLean is I've only known her for decades. One of my superpowers, as you'll get to know, is my ability to recall names. It's amazing. So Sasha McLean is a licensed professional counselor and a licensed marriage and family therapist in Houston, Texas. She is the executive director of Archway Academy, which is a high school for teens in recovery from substance abuse disorders and other co-occurring issues. Archway Academy happens to be the largest recovery high school in the nation and leader in research and program development. She's also the board chairman for the National Association of Recovery Schools. Prior to Archway, Sasha was the director of High Road at the Council of Alcohol and Drugs in Houston, where she ran the Alternative Peer Group and Intensive Outpatient Program. She's done a lot of amazing things, and I can go on, but I'm going to say hi.
Hi.
Thank you so much for coming.
Glad to be here.
So why don't you tell our listeners what you do?
What don't I do is kind of the question right now. And we are, of course, changing the way we do everything due to COVID-19. But Archway Academy is a pretty special place here in the heart of Houston. Our primary mission is to give students who are trying to get their high school diploma a place to finish up their education while they're also practicing the tools of being young people in recovery. So it's a combination of academics and recovery support all in one place. And really the foundation of what we do is all around building community with young people.
Awesome. And we're going to unpack each of those things. And when I thought about having Sasha on, as a storyteller or appreciation of stories, I thought, what's a better way to explain what she does on a daily basis rather than, have her sit in Gab, which would be awesome and we'll do, but for her to actually bring in maybe some first degree experiencers. So why don't you introduce your guests?
Oh, absolutely. I'm super excited for this. So it's my pleasure to introduce to you guys Sebastian and his father, Mitchell, who are both here with us today. Sebastian is a graduating senior at Archway. He actually only has about 9 days of school left until he is hopefully awarded a diploma. I don't know, Sebastian, let's get those classes done. And his incredible dad, Mitchell, who's been really just a pillar of strength and support and accountability sometimes for Sebastian and his sister, who is also a student at Archway.
Great. Well, welcome.
Thank you.
Mitchell, Sebastian.
Hi.
Hey, I heard you're going to grace us with maybe some hard rock and poetry.
Oh, is that what I'm going to do?
No, you can do whatever you want, basically. And thank you. And so you're a practicing attorney in Houston?
I am.
What type of law?
I handle real estate disputes.
Okay. Well, I've got to ask you if you know Sandy Weiner at Vincent and Elkins, real estate law.
Probably not.
Okay.
Probably not.
Darn. Okay. Well, he's my uncle. And the reason I ask is because whenever I say that name, people love him. And he's really just one of those guys, kind of like George. Julie, our co-host, hello.
Hey there. Hi, I'm Julie DeNofa. I'm president of Positive Recovery Centers, and I'm super happy to be here with Sasha. She's one of my most favorite people, and I've always just admired the work that she does and look for any opportunity to get to be in her presence.
Thanks, Julie.
Yeah, I'm going to piggyback on that. I was thinking of maybe offering my services. I got a master's in positive psychology not too long ago, and I love teaching. And I was going to maybe offer my services at one of my kids' schools. I got 3 kids at 3 different schools. One's going to be a senior in high school. And in general, classes on happiness are like the most popular at Harvard, at Yale, and like the guys that teach, they were my professors. And I probably will now that it's on the air. I'm happy to offer my services to you and your students. I mean, I love teaching, and if it's by Zoom, I don't have to wear pants. I don't know what you were going to say, but I'm just joking.
Sounds like you're making a commitment.
I am.
Yeah.
I am.
Deal is done.
All right. Yeah. So
let the ink dry.
Thank you for coming. Service work's really important, and I just now came back to Positive Recovery Centers or came back to Julie and Georgia's fold. But for a while, I sort of was in a strange position. It's nice to be part of the community again. I was just thinking that. So, Mitchell, how did you get to meet Sasha? Because I doubt she was getting sued for a real estate deal, right?
That is true. That is true. And, I'm here because, unfortunately, not a lot of people know about Archway Academy or the recovery programs. As a parent, I have 2 children. I guess it all starts with you probably never imagine that your children are going to use drugs or alcohol, okay? Because it's just not something you plan to occur. And then when it does occur, it usually occurs slowly. And as a parent, you usually believe that you can handle it because when they start using drugs and alcohol, like at 14 or 15, you've had 14 or 15 years to control your child, where basically you tell them what to do and they do it. It's as simple as that. And it's a really hard transition to go from total control of your child to realizing that you actually have very little control of your child. And that is a very difficult thing for a parent to understand. And so when my children started using drugs and alcohol, I believed that I could take care of it. I took them to counselors. I punished them. I gave them parameters. I restricted their behavior. I did all what I believe is the normal thing that most parents do.
Right, and I would assume that those things would work to some degree and may in fact do work.
Well, they probably didn't work, but the parent, I believed it was working. The other thing that's a real hard concept to get unless you're in recovery, and this is not a criticism of my children because I think this is a classic thing, and that is that most of what your children are telling you relating to drugs and alcohol is not true. But as a parent, you're used to your children being totally honest with you all the time.
Right.
And at some point, you realize that nothing they've told you is true. Now, that doesn't mean that they don't believe it when they say it, but sometimes we know it's not. I just know it's not true. So you put those things together, and then at some point, either sooner or later, it gets to a degree where you realize what I've been doing is not working. It's getting worse.
I imagine, too, that there's a point where you think that what they're doing is just like the rite of passage or just what every other 14-year-old is doing.
That's true. I can't tell you how many times my son told me, it's just marijuana. Everybody does it. It's not a gateway drug. Don't worry about it. I got this. It's just a little bit. Mm-hmm. And as a parent, you want to minimize it. You're busy with your world, making money at your job, whatever it is, and your child goes to school all day. But as I said, there comes a point where you panic and you discover whatever it is. Your child is arrested, your child is unconscious or missing, and you think, oh my God, this isn't working. Okay, well, who do I call? What do I do?
So what specifically was that moment for you? Was Sebastian unconscious?
He basically was.
You found him when, where?
I woke up at 3:00 in the morning to go to the bathroom, and I found him partying with a friend that I allowed to sleep over because I'm a permissive parent. Friends can sleep over. And he could not speak clearly. His eyes were glassed over. He couldn't stand up. He was out of it. And
so that voice tells you that this is no longer a small thing. It's no longer experimentation.
This is no longer something that I could handle.
Right.
It was like, what do I do? And so it's really helpful when you know somebody who's already in recovery.
Right.
So one of the lawyers at our firm is a recovered drug addict and alcoholic. And I called him and I said, should I take him to the hospital? What do I do? And he said, look, just let him sleep it off and call the adolescent treatment center that I went to as an adult and take him there tomorrow morning.
How old was Sebastian at this time?
Like 15. 15. But I had been working with him for 2 years.
Right.
He had been arrested twice by the school police, or 3 times. And and he was in counseling with a regular therapist, but he needed more. And so the next morning, actually what I did was I pretended I was taking him to school, and I dropped his sister off at school, and I continued on, and I told him I was taking him to a residential treatment center. That's a very hard thing for a parent to do. And it even got worse when they agreed he needed to be admitted to a residential treatment center, and they allowed me to walk him into the facility in his room area. And I realized that there were no other patients there, that he was going to be alone in the treatment center, that at that particular time, they had no other children. It was the staff and him by himself. And I had to leave him there.
I can't imagine the fear and the feelings of being disloyal on one level. You're saving him, but it's really one of the hardest things to do.
It is.
You know, I work as an interventionist. I'm in recovery. It runs in my family. I'm a professional, but everything you're saying is hits home. And I just can't underscore the it's not so much denial, but it is one of those things that you can't explain unless you go through yourself. But then for you to like hit that wall is one thing, and you courageously did it. You acted without waiting, which is also very important, because knowing when someone needs to go and the time before you get them in can be really dangerous. But then, you know, with all of that emotional weight, then having to drop him seemingly alone, must have been tough. And I could see it. I mean, for those of you that are listening, I mean, tears welled up in Mitchell's eyes, and it's really, even though he's well now and he's here and they're speaking, it's just one of those painful, traumatic things in life.
Part of me feels like if we didn't do what we did, Sebastian might not be here today. And we know families who have lost children. And Sebastian might even tell you that. And he didn't fight me. He didn't fight me. When we were there, he knew he needed to go in. Now, I will tell you, I visited him 2 days later, and he begged me to take him out of there. And I said, Sebastian, you can do this. I'm not taking you out. You're staying here. He was crying and wanting to go home and all that. And I just had to leave him like that. And, you know, there's in inpatient recovery, you have a residential, and then you have intensive outpatient. And then you need to know, where do you go next? So your question was, how did I meet Sasha and Archway?
I was trying to figure out how to ask that. I was like, where's the segue?
So part of recovery is you don't want your child to go back to the same people and environment that helped facilitate this. I was going to say caused it, but you know what I mean. That
right, all the factors in place foster it, right.
You want him to have a new experience. And not only that, he needs training for the rest of his life. That the degree of alcohol and drug abuse that Sebastian participated in for years indicated that this is something he's going to have to be aware of and get the tools to take care of himself. He's going to go to college in August, and he's going to be on his own. And I feel like all of this preparation has given him the tools that he's now going to be able to take care of himself. He's going to be far away. But when he was ready, he can't stay in treatment forever. He needs to go to school, and they do have a school program there, but he needs to go back to traditional school. And that's where I withdrew him from his regular HISD high school. And thank goodness, Archway Academy provided this program where it's a combination of, we're going to teach you what you need to know, but we're also going to give you daily support and opportunities and counselors and therapists and be with other kids that want to be sober. So these are not kids that are using drugs and alcohol. These are kids that don't want to use drugs and alcohol, but have a inclination to do so. If he or any other child said, hey, I'm going to continue using, Archway is going to say, well, this isn't the place for you. This is when you're ready, then you come here.
Right.
And the other thing is that the school operates, there are some acronyms that people need to know about and learn about that I didn't even know what they are. So there's an APG, is called an alternative peer group, that if you're not in recovery, you don't know what that is. But the point is, after school, and school is like from 8 to 3, we don't want Sebastian or any kids just to like be released onto the streets and like go do whatever you want to do. So the school requires that the children, the students, have an after-school program continuing their recovery. And that is for fun, that is for support, that's learning the 12 steps, that's Saturday night, Friday night, going out and going to the malls together. And so that's the package. But the educational component is where Archway Academy comes in. And I think Sasha can tell you, because my children, both of mine are seniors. Sebastian's going to Texas Tech. So my daughter's going to Texas State. And, I still have the same parental goals that I would like them to have. But you learn at Archway and in recovery, Sebastian's doing a real good job not jumping in, is that it has to be him. That's something that I learned, is that it doesn't matter what I want. It doesn't matter if I want him to be sober. It doesn't matter if I want him to go to college. It doesn't matter if I want him to be a comedy writer or a lawyer. One of the most important things for parents to learn, and it's not easy, is that you can want whatever you want, but what really matters is what your child wants, because that's what they're going to do.
Absolutely. And parents that might be listening that don't have a child with a substance abuse issue, and mine are not using, I could tell you, because they know my story and I'm also bribing them. What you said about having no control over them, about the same age, I discovered that as well. And Sasha's been in quarantine with the 12-year-old who all of a sudden is becoming a man and probably learns that too. And I know a lot of parents are feeling like, oh, well, Sebastian went to Sasha and Sasha told him what to do, or Sasha straightened him out for me or told me what to do. But just as much as it's his idea, like, what is it like learning the powerlessness as a parent with your own disease as maybe an untreated Al-Anon, for lack of a better term. So it's not about him. So about your own powerlessness, right? And yeah, it extends to him and what he wants to do for a living. And I'm asking a leading question, mind you, because the powerlessness, the serenity prayer is a very empowering thing. If you can divert your energy to what is under your control, you're happier. The Stoics figured that out a long time ago. But yeah, so maybe speak to that.
It's true. And I hope nobody thinks of this as selfish, but it's part of the recovery, and that is there is a certain element of freedom for me when I accept and realize that those life decisions, consequences, or rewards that Sebastian's going to do belong to him. I can provide the support and the love and the home and all of those things, and that's really where it ends. No amount of yelling or taking the cell phone is going to achieve the results that I want unless he wants it to.
That peace of mind you spoke about,
yeah.
Would you have come to this, do you think, without his drug use?
Probably not.
Right.
Probably I would have been under the fantasy
right
for a lot longer, thinking, oh, this is me. I'm graduating and I'm going to college and all those things. Congratulations to me. But it's really not. And it's still hard as a parent. People always see your child for better or worse, and then they say something to you like, congratulations, you did a great job, or whatever it is. But there is peace and serenity. And all parents can do is try to give their kids the skills and the example of what to do. And then you hope that they do it.
Absolutely. So before I get to you and your rapping or whatever you want to, I want to hear your side of it. Absolutely. But Sasha, what do you find is the biggest challenge you have for incoming families?
Great question. So I would say probably right before families get to us, they have been living in the fantasy that Mitchell talked about. And I think one of the most dangerous beliefs that parents can have is that something would never happen to their child. Like, well, that just won't happen in my family. We're a spiritual family. We did Cub Scouts, whatever, we played soccer. We eat dinner at the table together as a family. Right. Each parent sort of has a checklist of activities they're going to do or things they're going to do that would somehow prevent their child from ever having painful life experiences. And so part of the denial is that the red flags will be very clearly present, but the parent has a belief system that it just couldn't be true.
Right.
And so right before they come to us, they really just get hit by a freight train where so many things that they believed that protected them in some ways, all of a sudden they're unmasked. When families come to us and we do the tour, you can see, first of all, the tension in the families, typically, lots of tension within the families. I've actually had to drop some parents back off at the Welcome Center because their participation in the tour was so unhelpful for the child. There's that tension there, but then also just the fact that everyone is in a really unsettled, fearful place. The kid, for the most part, is being forced into recovery by their parent. That's one of the hallmarks of adolescent recovery that's different from adult recovery is not all adults, but many adults choose the path of recovery based on their life circumstances. But when you're looking at young people, many young people feel more forced into recovery by their adult parents.
Right.
And so just in terms of what we have to do to attract them into recovery or keep them engaged in recovery is really different. So those are some of the things that I see during parent tours in particular is, the parents sort of becoming unblind to the fact that this is really what's happening in their family. What a difficult pill that is to swallow. And then the anger and resentment happening and the finger pointing and the blaming that still exists when they first come to us. And then as they spend a little time with us, then we get to see some of the transformation happen in the family where the parent begins to let go of things they can't control anyway. So they're less resentful as a parent. And the kid starts taking responsibility for a lot of their choices and they act a little less entitled. Entitlement's a huge issue that we deal with in adolescent recovery for sure. And everyone begins to do their own work and take care of their own person and develop their own soul. And then that's when really magical things
That's
start
awesome.
happening.
Right. So families come in with the checklist of my family has power steering and anti-lock disc brakes and, I've got a warranty. And so on the surface, it doesn't look like some families deserve or sort of fit the bill. And that happens with individuals too. Like I can't be an alcoholic. I still work. Right. It's just amazing.
And let's also, Mitchell alluded to this. Not only do parents sometimes, kind of blame themselves, like, well, if my child's really involved in drugs, they begin to really shame themselves. But then society also shames parents pretty heavily. Your kid gets arrested and all of a sudden the finger's pointed at you. Why didn't you do this? And then all of a sudden we begin kind of turning on each other. Instead of being a community that supports or a community of parents, it's like, wow, this could happen to any of us. You're the one who's in it. Let's rally around you. That idea of no one brings you a casserole when you put your kid in residential treatment, but wouldn't that be nice? As a parent like Mitchell has to make this really difficult decision to drop off and leave his son in the care of someone else in residential treatment, and then comes home and is part of a community or society that doesn't understand what a massive deal that is for him. We don't come to comfort. We don't as a culture. So there are a lot of things that I think parents walk into Archway with. And it's our role and responsibility to both educate the parents about what's your responsibility and what's not, but then do a lot of nurturing and comforting and reminding. Because sometimes when parents experience that level of shame or stigma, whether it's blaming themselves or another spouse blaming them, we've got a lot of that goes on within families. You weren't hard enough on them, you were too hard on them, that kind of stuff. A lot of what we have to do is sort of go backwards and help them believe you are a fantastic parent. You did so many things right. Let's talk about what you did right so you can continue doing those things. What do you let go of? What do you hold on to? Because they really lose confidence as parents. It's almost like they get disconnected from their parent intuition because they're in such shock about their situation.
Absolutely. And the same thing about how the community doesn't rally. Sebastian, what was it like being 15? You got sober at 15? 16?
Yeah, I got sober at 16.
So many kids are drinking. If not alcoholically, and trying other drugs or using them sporadically. Doesn't mean all of them have a substance abuse issue, but I'm just sitting here thinking, yeah, society doesn't rally around parents, but you're sort of an outcast at some point because during that period, people are trying things, right? The adolescent brain has to rebel, has to kind of learn to live on its own. And so, yeah, finding the APGs, which I thought was actually a video game moniker. I thought it was like a role-playing game. But yeah, it's the alternative peer groups is key. But also becoming at peace with the fact that, okay, my people aren't everybody. And it's a blessing because I find people are almost stupid when, if it gets to a certain point of drinking and drug use. But it's hard. So what was that like? Coming out of recovery and realizing, okay, my choice of friends is small, very small.
When I came out of recovery, I didn't get my phone for, let's say, about a month or 2 months. But when I did get my phone, the only person that hit me up, as we say, was my drug dealer. So that's always fun. No one really asked where I was or, hey, where'd you go? You want to hang out? Hey, do you want to buy drugs? Was pretty much my response or what I got. I didn't feel like I had a supportive group of friends.
Right, that opened your eyes to what was really going on in your group, right?
Yeah, because they just encouraged the behavior. They thought it was oh, dude, look at this guy. He can do crazy things, sneak out and do whatever he wants. But I think even in my mind, I felt very alone just every night. because like I would have to play the role of a son, like a good son, and then the role of my drug addiction at the same time. I had to like balance between those.
Are you talking about before you got sober?
Yeah, before I
Right. It's like the double life that people lead. Right.
Yeah, for sure. And,
All right. So like tell your story.
oh, my story?
Yeah.
It's a lot like what my dad said, but it's great hearing.
So you actually came home and found your son glazed over?
Yeah. I love to hear when my dad tells my story. It's weird hearing it from a parent. But I think somewhere between discovering myself and aging is when I realized I had a drug addiction problem. But I never wanted to say that because I thought I was living the rap song that everyone's listening to. I was the rock star people were telling me I could have been. I was living the celebrity life as a 14-year-old, and I was getting popular for it. But it was lonely and fun, very fun, but very dangerous. I think I've called my dad maybe like twice and said, "Hey Dad, I don't know what to do. Like I need help like now." And he was like, I don't, "Should we pump your stomach? What should we do?" And looking back on those like moments were like very sobering, because I think there's a small second where like I sobered up and I was like, "Oh shit, my dad's looking at me. He shouldn't be looking at me like this." And it's rough because I blamed myself for bringing my little sister into this. She would like look at me and be like, "That's my older brother. Let me follow him down this path."
How did you start?
Middle school, just casual. It was a progressive illness. It was somewhere between transitioning from middle school and freshman year. I knew as soon as my first drug of choice was like marijuana. And I knew as soon as like I got high the first time, I was like, okay, this is my first love. I love this. This is great.
Why did you love it so much?
I was in biology class when I got high for the first time. And I remember how delusional I was towards the entire world, how I was out of it. Because biology is really boring and I didn't want to be in that class.
Hey, speak for yourself, man. I'm a doctor.
That took me out of biology. And it also made me seem really rebellious. I was that guy that would do that thing, like hold my beer kind of guy. It put me into like this character that I was trying to find. I mean, I was just a freshman. I moved to a new school. I didn't know anyone really. So being in the druggy group was a group nonetheless.
I was belonging, right? It's a group. It's like my people, right?
It's like, all right, this is where I belong, you know? And I'm a musician. So I heard, a lot of musicians like use drugs. I was like, okay, well, let me give it a shot.
What do you play?
I play piano, guitar, drums, and I sing.
Oh, so just one thing.
Yeah, just a few things.
I don't think you'll meet a more talented young man than this one sitting right here.
Sweet.
I was playing the harmonica the other day on a Zoom call.
And your voice is great. I feel like you could be a disc jockey. I can't believe you're like 17, 18.
Yeah.
Well, that wasn't good. But your normal voice was good.
Yeah. I love it. I mean, as getting into high school was a scary transitional time. There's just so many people. I think my school was like 3,000 plus people. And I was in a middle school where going back to that middle school, it just seemed a lot smaller than what I remembered it was. So I was just so small compared to everything in the world. And in that, I wanted to break free and find independence. But when I would run away to find that independence, when I would use drugs and get arrested, I realized, and then I would be sitting in the backseat of a police car, I realized I didn't know what I was doing, where I was going. My dad put an image in my head of, you're a good boy, this is what you do. But I didn't know what that meant because I wanted to grow up at a young age. And I feel like I had to grow up at a young age. I mean, there was some domestic moments in my life that I had to look over and not bring with me into school. My dad would, not my dad sitting here, but my papi would physically hurt me. And every time I think about it or bring it up, I usually get met with laughter. Like, you're just, but I was like, what, 14? No, I was like 7. Even then I wanted to conquer the world. It's hard to go back to that. It's hard to go back to that home and call that a home because it didn't feel like it. So I would use drugs to escape that home and be alone in my room and just go to a different world, the one that I would make up. And worked for a while, but then I think back and I look on memories of me alone in an alleyway with a leather jacket and a mullet on whatever drug, crying because none of my friends want to talk to me because I've stolen from them, lied to them. I cheated on my girlfriend at the time, lied to her. No one wanted to talk to me. My dad didn't trust me. I had to lie with where I was. Felt so powerless and my life was just so unmanageable I always think back to that moment where I was just sitting on a rock and it started raining, top it all off.
So moments like that, you realize, holy shit, I have a problem.
Yeah.
And I would bet that when your dad finally took you not fighting was maybe a feeling of relief that you didn't identify with at the time. And I say that from personal experience because I was intervened on. I wasn't a teenager. I was 33 and an MD. And I told everybody to F off. And I swore I didn't have a problem. But looking back, my soul was saying, thank God, what took you guys so long? Right? Did you have that experience?
I reread my diary that I wrote when I was in rehab. Like a few days ago, I found it in like a drawer. It's just, I think going in to the rehab center, I was still high. I was still out of it. I couldn't understand where I was. And I like to think I woke up there the next day. Like I blanked out on the ride to school, quote unquote. And I didn't fight it because looking at what was a drug test, a 12-panel drug test, and 4 of them came back positive. One I didn't even know the name of. It was just like, I might need to be here. I didn't know what I want. I didn't think like fighting it wouldn't get me very far. Sobering up, especially my first day sober, was weird because you start to feel again. You start to feel alone and truly alone without any drugs. You're just staring you're like, what is it? Medicine bed, something like that.
How long were you alone until you got another,
it was like
patient with you?
4 days.
You were really alone.
I was really alone. I had my guitar though. So her and I got connected. Yeah. But it was interesting. All the nurses, I mean, I didn't hate it. I like to think it was a good experience. I got extra pillows, an extra snack, and, extra chocolate milk, whatever. It was cool.
And you're such an old soul. I bet you loved, being around all the adults.
Oh, yeah,
like,
100%.
Fit in perfect.
I would have conversations with them, not be interrupted.
Actually, I think one of the things that I found most interesting is after recovery, his bringing him back to our house and his room, he shared, and I would ask him about what that was like to come back to your room and your house the first time.
Dad, it's like I'm sober now. Like, look, I'm coming to my room. There's drugs everywhere. Just knock on the wall. There's drugs will come out. But I'm coming back to my room and I'm sober and it feels like it's brand new. It feels like a new home. It feels like I'm in a new family. And I remember it was like overwhelming and I started crying. And my sister was like, why are you crying? But I remember looking at everything with a new light. Like my dad's love for me, especially that first hug that he gave me, it's like a vulnerable. It was me and my dad. That was all it was. I wasn't pretending to be something I wasn't. He truly knew that his son was a drug addict. And I just felt like a whole new person. And I was experiencing everything again for the first time.
Yeah, that happens. I can relate. Absolutely. It happens. That love pierces through everything. It's awesome. You described it so well. I have goosebumps. So tell me about the time you met Sasha and sort of what do you think about this lady right here? Right?
Man, I think I was in a PDAP like award ceremony. It was really weird.
So PDAP is
Palmer Drug Abuse Program.
Thank you.
It was the APG that I went to and I still go to today. I've always gone there. But we were at like an award ceremony and she was the guest speaker or something. And I was like, who is this lady? And why is everyone cheering her name? But she like spoke very like, fierce. She was strong. And I was like, oh my God, I'm scared. I have like a week sober and everyone here is, happy and not on drugs. What? But since then, I think Sasha has just been, when I think of her, like I think of just a woman who smiles a lot and I can come to for anything. And there's been instances where like I've needed to go to her. I guess I'll just open up that I had to go to a mental institution and I was sober. And I think it was either Sasha's call or someone else of the staff. But it was, I don't think I would have had I don't think I could have been that open with anybody else except for the staff at Archway.
Tell them why you went.
Yeah, there's several factors that went into why I went, but
I guess what I mean, you don't need to go into detail except that it was due to suicide thoughts.
Yeah.
It's a suicide issue.
Yeah, right. Thanks, Dad. Anyway, there was a lot that went on in 2020 2020 has been a rough year for a lot of people, but especially me. But I think I've grown a lot from it.
Well, and I think that's something people don't think often. I remember I got sober 18 years ago, and I remember people being like, well, once you got sober, like, wasn't it just nothing but yellow brick road and sunshine
right.
and like every wonderful opportunity? And like, life is still hard. I've actually had harder things happen to me in recovery than I even did when I was using. And I think your experience of this last school year in particular, you've had some of the hardest things that have ever happened in your life happen to you this year.
100%.
Like whether it be girl stuff, and, tragedy, and you're having to deal with grief and loss and stuff like that. And I mean, it's really been an honor, Sebastian, to watch you figure out how to do hard life stuff sober. It's been super cool to watch.
And
painful for you, super cool for me to watch and witness.
I think it's interesting and important and very telling that when Sebastian had crisis to deal with, as a parent, I was concerned of relapse and drugs.
Absolutely.
So I would talk with him, and he indicated that's I'm not even thinking about that. I have other issues to deal with. I'm not thinking of drugs and alcohol.
Right.
Which I guess means something, that he's in a pretty good sober place. You're sober how many months now?
I'm sober 17 months.
17 months.
Yeah, as a voyeur at this point, I'm in awe how courageous it was for you to admit that, first of all, but it shows me the strength that you have because it's been dealt with, right? Just so you know, each of you will get a book, all three of you. It's a Positive Recovery Daily Guide, and every day there's an inspirational quote, and there's something to do that is meant to drive well-being. So it's based on the science of happiness, and today's is about overcoming trauma. Now, I didn't give you guys this ahead of time because I didn't want to steer your story, but it just so happens that it's perfect. What we are talking about today in today's intervention is describing a trauma that happened, how you feel about it today, and how is it different than before. So something like you were struggling with, Sasha alluded that it was a romance problem, and nothing hurts as much, right? I mean, it's bad. I don't know what it was, but I have gone freak out mode when stuff like that happens. I mean, it's really, really hard. And the fact that you didn't relapse, you're early in recovery, most relapses happen early on, and that you accepted help again is just amazing, dude. It really is. Like, I can't even
just
tell you.
accepting it, but having that trust to be able to go to Sasha and say, hey, I need some help. And whether maybe that was a direct result of your dad kind of prompting it, or maybe you just came about it yourself, but doing that's an action that you took and that you can call your own.
100%. I mean, I think I'm at a point where I can ask for help now.
That's awesome. That's so empowering as a adult. It's a skill that most adults don't pick up because I could say, especially men in society, we're like, don't cry, don't ask for help. This rugged individualism is still pervasive, right? Women are supposed to be Wonder Women or Super Women, work, kids, and like not have any cracks. But, things don't really happen that way in real life. But I think it's a great segue as we're wrapping up is to sort of share our experience with the positive intervention. So you did it, yes?
I did.
Awesome. Follow directions. So today's PI or positive intervention is to journal about a trauma or difficulty experienced and learn from. Choose a trauma that gives you a sense of resolution, since the object is to learn how traumas can be enriching. Write down how your worldview changed and how you gained insight into yourself and how you ended up benefiting. And what did the experience mean to you in the moment, and what does it mean now? And do those meanings differ from each other? What gratitude can you now find looking back at the challenging experience? So I'll go first, as I do. So mine was a few years ago. I was speaking at Methodist Hospital at this liver conference, and my biggest fear is to look like an idiot. And because I feel like, that inner voice of shame, like you're so dumb, you're a fraud. Wait till they really find out, how stupid you are and that you don't belong. And I was in the tertiary medical complex. Like Methodist is the best hospital in Houston, I think, personally, not that they're a sponsor yet. I tried so hard to impress everybody and to make people laugh. And I got all these programs that were animated, and I was like zipping things all around. And basically like halfway through the talk, I realized I was lost. And I sort of just kind of gave up. And I felt so stupid because I failed so big. And before that, I had usually gotten like all fives. Like, how was a speaker 0 to 5? I didn't even read what I got because I know it was just like the most embarrassing thing in the world. And like, so at the time I thought they're never going to nobody's going to look at me. And, I'm done, right? I'm done. It was almost worse than being an addict doctor, because I got sober after my MD. I was surprised when they asked me to be on their liver transplant team to like help them decide which alcoholics that are maybe on the machinery that can't talk would benefit from a liver before they had 6 months of sobriety because they wouldn't live that long.
Wow.
Yeah. And so with time, at this point, when I'm asked to talk, now my preparation is so much better and there's no pressure. I'm not trying to impress anybody. I'm just delivering information. And so it was like the greatest thing ever. It also helped that one of my best friends, Garth Davis, who's written books, who's had a TV show, and he's like a big rock star. He had a huge fail at Dell, or something like that. I can't remember if it was Dell or like something, but the fact that somebody I knew who was like in a position that I exalted also had a big fail, and then I helped me process it, normalized it, sort of like having addiction. That was me.
I was at that event, and he's dramatizing it a little bit. I'm sure it felt that way to him. I was in the audience and listening to people say, wow, he's great. Like, it's an awesome call. And it's true. And I don't say that just to make him feel good. It is also about our own, like how we see ourselves so often and what we carry with us that we have to kind of make sure that we take notice of as well.
Oh, that internal critic.
Yep.
Dude, I stunk like fish on ice. It's terrible. All right. You want to rock and roll?
Yeah, sure. I think this whole experience of the pandemic and life kind of slowing down for everyone has made me read more and journal more, and my self-care is like the best it's been in decades. And so anyway, when I was reading through this, I was like, do I go big? Do I go home? What do I do? And so I went big. So I picked one that I've clearly processed so that I don't fall apart here and then need mental health counseling right at the end of the session. But I picked getting divorced, which is still pretty recent for me. So, when I was talking about some of the hardest stuff that I've had to go through has actually been in sobriety. Plus I got sober at 22. And so I've had just as much life after sobriety than even before. And so after being married for 20 years, getting separated and then filing for divorce and having at the time, 10-year-old son that we're trying to navigate this with, and pain and betrayal. And I think for me, some of the biggest highlights of what I learned or what I began to believe about myself or things that were different then before now is, number one, I'm so much stronger than I give myself credit for. I can handle some serious shit. And I normally do that by supporting other people handle it and then forget that I'm actually pretty fantastic at handling it myself. And I remember thinking, I have some choices to make. Either this will be something that makes my heart like shrivel up like a raisin and I begin to not trust or be really angry or whatever, or this will be something where love will expand for me and I will start practicing forgiveness in a way I've never had to practice it before. And I will be paying attention now to things that maybe I was sort of blinded to paying attention to before. And how do I get comfortable being alone? I mean, all those things that I really had no desire to grow in.
Right.
That was really not my plan, my long-term plan. But those were some of the ways in which I overcame. And, of course, in the midst of it, I remember thinking like, this is, one of the worst things, not the worst, but literally one of the worst things, to have my family sort of having to reinvent what family even means. And now I have to co-parent with this person who I don't really care for right now. And what is that going to look like? And then, now to be a year or two from it and be like, no, like we can figure out, it's amazing what I can figure out how to do with the tools that I have in recovery. But it was, I would never wish this kind of trauma, but now I'm for sure at the point where I'm grateful that I had it. In terms of how much I've grown and how much I've changed and my perspective on things. And, since Sebastian's sitting here and I love talking to him about relationships, romantic relationships, it's even made me softer as a school executive director when the kids break up and it's like mind-blowing, earth-shattering for them. And I used to have like not a ton of patience because I wanted to be like, it's your little bullshit high school relationship. Like, can we just move on? So my,
advice she did not give Sebastian 12 months ago.
So congrats to me. You're good for Sebastian that I went through a divorce prior to Sebastian having relationship issues because, I think that it just allowed me to have a different perspective, more compassion and more empathy and more appreciation for what that wounding really feels like. And, how I'm not really very different than the kids at Archway. Maybe I'm a little older. Maybe I have a little more time sober. But, their pain and their life experiences are so similar to my pain and my life experiences.
Wow.
That's perspective I don't think I would have had prior to this.
All right. Yeah. As the four of you listen to Julie, put on your thinking caps because I know what's coming. And with this assignment, didn't you Didn't you express a little trepiditude or?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you guys, we're going to psychoanalyze her as a group. Okay.
I'm all in.
All right.
So I was looking at the assignment and I was like, man, I don't feel like I've really had that much trauma in my life. And I've lived a life. Like, it's not as if I haven't. Not as if I haven't had things happen in my life that I didn't particularly love or that I didn't find challenging. But I really am sitting here saying, like, I don't know that I define them as trauma. So I said, what is wrong with me? Why don't I feel like they were trauma? Like, is it because I'm just that far away from them now and I can look back at them and say they were growth opportunities? Or I can look back at them and say I'm better because of this in this way? Is it because I'm more resilient? And I know that I could spell resilient with a capital R-E. Like I keep going. I do feel like I have a high quantity of resiliency in my life, but I don't feel traumatized by too many things that have occurred in my life. And so I struggled to do the assignment because of that.
And I made you say that, so thank you.
Well, and what a blessing to have.
And
that
is
kind
it?
of
I don't know.
mind frame. I mean, I would say it is. My goodness. Yeah, I love it.
Well, I would like to share, but I'd like to ask Sebastian to go first, and then I can go after him.
Okay, Dad. Thank you. I think I'll talk about my bullshit high school relationship.
You can do it in the form of a poem too, if you want, or you can do something like that for us if you can or you want.
What's it called when you like speak like off the cuff?
It's called a freestyle.
Freestyling.
Yeah,
I think he's good at it.
I think I'm just going to talk.
Okay.
But I don't beatbox good enough for you.
I think I just don't know what love is as a 17-year-old. To say that you love someone, you might find like, your high school sweetheart. That might happen, but you can't force it. I think my mistake was putting an expectation on love the way I put an expectation on drugs. I think recovery should totally be, I got in recovery to better myself. And by sharing that with a girl I met in rehab, I didn't think it would end well. And it didn't. It clicked in my mind that I need to grow, and I can't do that holding someone's hand. I need to grow alone. And with God, of course. But her and I need to go our separate paths. And easier said than done. It's okay. I'll be fine. I think I've grown more over the breakup than I have while I was in that 10-month, 11-month relationship.
What would you say is the biggest thing you learned about yourself?
I can love myself without someone telling me so. That I am beautiful without someone telling me so. Yeah.
Old soul for sure.
For real.
So I took the assignment very seriously also, as I do with everything Sasha tells me.
Oh, you gave it to him?
I did.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay, phenomenal.
I'm a cheater.
And I had to give it some real thought. And I'm a very fortunate person. I've had a very happy life and lots of opportunities thanks for lots of things. Having 2 wonderful children that I adopted are part of all that wonderful goodness. And my son knows this. When I told him I had picked a tragedy, he knew exactly what tragedy that was. And so I graduated from law school in 1982. And so I went to college and did all that in the 70s. And I happened to be a gay man. And most of the people that I went to college with are dead because we did not know, like we're dealing with a virus now. I can't tell you the similarities of the virus of HIV and AIDS, where there was no medicine, there was no cure, there was no vaccine. And for me, when I went to college from 1978 to 82, and as you know, as he's getting ready to go off to college, you do a lot of exploration and you're free and you're wild and you're crazy. Thank goodness I wasn't as crazy as some of my friends were. And I'm not being judgmental because there was no talk about it. That was the time that everybody got infected. And then in the 80s, everybody got sick and everybody died. And so I keep a list of 100 friends that have died. And what was really strange during the 80s and the early 90s, the trauma that I identified was the fact that people who had HIV and AIDS at that time knew they were going to die. And I knew they were going to die, and they knew they were going to die. And so we would have these very very surreal talks preparing for them to die. And I don't know, unless you've lived through it, you don't really know what it's like to sit with someone and plan their funeral in detail, from the music to the poems to the location to who's invited and all of that. And then they die, and then you put the plan that they prepared into action. and it's surreal. It's surreal. It's just it's a life-changing experience that for me, it isn't that long ago. For me, when someone's sick and they may die, I know that I need to talk to them and say what I want to say because I know what it's like to have people you love die a lot. And so in the assignment, it's to talk about the trauma and what you learn and how you grow and things like that. And so for me, for the rest of my life, I appreciate beautiful moments, beautiful experiences. I make sure to tell people what they need to know because you never know how long they're going to be there. And so the reality and the experience of living is much more emphasized for me had I not gone through that experience. And I try to share that with my children. And you know, as a lawyer, I was a young lawyer at that time. Probably the best compliment that people would have, because I help people with AIDS at the time do their wills, handle discrimination matters and all that. And the thing that I will always remember is when I had a young man or young woman in my office and they would say, look, you're my last hope. Nobody else can help me. There's no other place I can go. If you can't help me get my life insurance reinstated or my health insurance there, I'm done. And when I was able to help them with that, it really made me feel like I was contributing to society. You know what they say, because people have said this to me, because I've been on talk shows around the country, and they would say, well, why are you doing this? You're not HIV positive. Why are you doing this? And then I had a talk show host say to me, well, you know, the hottest place in hell is reserved for those during a crisis who do nothing. And so that kind of has relevance in today's world, but it certainly had relevance at that time where there were so many people who were afraid, and I understand their fear, but didn't want anything to do with these people who were dying alone in the hospitals. So that's my trauma that I lived with.
So are you familiar with Abraham Verghese? He wrote My Own Country. Okay, I recommend it.
Okay.
He was an infectious disease doc in,
Really?
I think, Tennessee or somewhere. So, and he wrote a book and was made into an HBO series. He was one of my professors.
Really?
But what came up for me was that movie with Tom Hanks, Philadelphia, absolutely destroyed me. I can't imagine what it was like. For you, it was probably like my experience watching A Dog's Purpose, because that destroyed me times 10. I felt that was a great movie.
It was a great movie.
You were lived it to some degree, not that you had the virus.
That was a groundbreaking movie to help people understand. And the story of that, where the law firm was denying that they knew it. And the other thing, because there are a lot of similarities between both sexuality and HIV and drug abuse, where there's shame and there's denial and there's lying and all of that, because many people with HIV would not come out to their employer and say, hey, I have a disability, I have HIV. They would make up stories. And what that did from a legal perspective was they were not protected because the employer would say, he never told us.
Right.
We never knew. We thought he was doing something else. So there was a lot of truth to that movie. And actually Denzel Washington's character, Tom Hanks was great as the client. But Denzel Washington, the
reporter, right?
No, he was his lawyer.
Oh, he was his lawyer.
Denzel Washington was his lawyer who went to court and said, you know, Your Honor, let's say it. Let's say what we're really talking about here today.
Right.
And he just talked about it. It was a great movie.
It was.
So looking at what we're really talking about, and thank you for sharing so openly. I appreciate that. It's good to kind of hear and feel that. What I also heard you say was two things that resonated, and actually one thing for both of you, was that you said to be able to ask someone, you know, like to say, you're my last hope. And I think that you both experienced that in some way or another with Sasha. You know, you with getting him into the school, and then you with your recent situation in 2020 earlier this year, saying, you're my last help me. So Sasha, thank you so much for helping all the people that you do.
Well, it's much easier to help than it is to ask for help. I think the real courage comes, you know, and I think it's probably the greatest gift of my recovery, my personal recovery, and I believe is the greatest gift of other people's recovery, is that we learn to ask for help. And at first we learn to ask for help maybe so we don't die or we don't get incarcerated or we don't, you know, go to prison or whatever. But then I think afterwards we don't realize how well asking for help will serve us in every area with every life challenge that comes. Because getting sober is hard. You know, staying sober is challenging. but just trying to live a beautiful life. I mean, that requires community and a village and go-to people, and it doesn't end with, the first year of sobriety or graduation from a recovery school or a collegiate recovery program or, it just never ends. And so, one of the greatest gifts of recovery is the community of it and then the practice of asking for help, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And thank you so much, Sasha, Mitchell, Julie, co-host, and Sebastian. Even when I know it, my mind tells me I don't. I could never be in sales. Thank you guys so much. This has been a very impactful podcast for me, I'm sure for everybody. So for the next positive intervention for podcast 5 would be to focus on your health. Write 10 things you can be grateful for regarding the current state of your health. Choose one thing to do today in order to improve your physical health. Schedule a doctor's appointment. Exercise. Make healthy eating choices. Floss. Prioritize rest, or ensure all your basic needs are met. Whatever you choose to do today, stick to it and practice it with intentionality. So thank you for listening. I'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Positive Recovery MD. Don't forget to visit positiverecoverymd.com to sign up to get your daily positive intervention sent straight to your inbox. Be sure to subscribe to Positive Recovery MD on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcast to receive an automatic download when a new episode drops. And as always, if you or someone you know needs help, visit positiverecovery.com or call 877-4-SOBRIETY, which is 877-476-2743. We are here to help.
I, Sebastian, would like to dedicate this podcast to Xavier Barron. Happy birthday. I think about you every day.
Who is Xavier Barron?
Xavier Barron was my really close authority figure that I looked up to, and is the first person that really said that a minority figure can be an authority, and taught me that taught me everything I know. Really, he was the program director of PDAP. He passed away.